public-private partnership agreement between the Northeast Ohio Area-Wide Coordinating Agency and the Hyperloop Transportation Technologies to study a transformative system, bringing a fifth mode of transportation to reality. We are gathered here as distributors, supporters, consortium leaders, and funders to hear the results of this feasibility study. We were from NOACA, working together to convey successful findings that will give credence to not just ability, but reality that the future transportation is in Hyperloop. We will hear about how this region could develop the Hyperloop transportation system and to make the Midwest mega region global epic for this development. So let's introducing some very important to give her age. I would like to introduce Cuyahoga County Executive Armin Budish to give remarks, followed to introduce Valerie County, NOACA's Board President and Chief of Communications, Government McCall. NOACA's Board President and Chief of Communications, Government and Chiefs for the City of Cleveland. Please welcome Executive Budish and Chief Valerie McCall.
Cruise time, pound. It's time for us to think big. Transformation. We're going to track. We can't simply do what everyone else is doing. We must separate ourselves from the We must separate ourselves from the pack in both our thinking and our actions. I just returned from a meeting of the most innovative, exciting county leaders from all over the country. The areas that are moving ahead, and I'm proud to say that that's what we're doing. Big transformational ideas here in the county, like the Lakefront Access Plan, the Climate Change Action Plan, and the microgrid. The Hyperloop is another big game changer. I want to thank NOACA and Chief McCall, the president, and Grace Gallucci and her team for leading this effort. The 18-month Hyperloop feasibility study brought together 80 public organizations to provide support and resources to the study. Bringing together that kind of collaboration is how NOACA gets so much done for our region. Exciting insights. For example, Hyperloop can accommodate both the commuter and freight expansion projected in the region for the next 25 years. Hyperloop would change the face of transportation. Imagine traveling from Cleveland to Chicago in less than an hour at speeds of over 500 miles an hour. The economic benefits could be in the billions, not millions, but billions of dollars. And we could see the creation of hundreds of thousands of new jobs. Does this sound like pie in the sky? Of course it does. But if we want to get a slice of that pie, we have to start thinking big. The same old will get us just that. Same old will get us just that. The same old. Transform this region at hyper speed. Again, I want to thank NOACA for leading this effort.
All right, good morning. Good morning. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. We're here to talk about something exciting. I know we're all awake already. It's Monday. The sun is shining and it's 70 degrees out. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. Good morning. I'm Valerie McCall. I am the current and I'm still it. Good morning. I'm Valerie McCall. I am the board chair of NOACA. So if you can see the partnership, that's how we work together in this region. And it's an honor and a privilege to be here this morning on behalf of the City of Cleveland and on behalf of NOACA to speak about this great project. As we all know that infrastructure and transportation creates a system of community connections and new opportunities for growth. On a national level, everybody's talking about mobility management and ways to think outside the box. Where I'm here to tell you today that this Hyperloop project is just that. Make no outside the box. Where I'm here to tell you today that this Hyperloop project is just that. Make no more mistake. This is transformative mobility management. There's tremendous excitement and interest in transportation technology in this region and nationally, and we are pleased to work with so many wonderful partners to create the first mega region. We're going to take credit. We're going to take credit for that. And regional Hyperloop system with routes from. So bringing Hyperloop to our region would bolster economic growth, create jobs, strengthen Ohio's ability to travel across the region quickly and efficiently, and improve the daily lives of millions of Americans. And so the City of Cleveland is in support of the further studying the feasibility of this project, and we look forward to a continued partnership with our partners to bring this project to fruition. And look forward to continued partnership with our partners to bring this project to fruition. So I'll say thank you.
Please join me in giving County Executive Beautician Chief McCall another round of applause for their support on this feasibility study. Next, it gives great pleasure to bring up our Hyperloop Transportation Technologies CEO, Andreas de Leon, who will be followed by NOACA's Executive Director, Grace Gallucci. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan. Thank you, County Executives Chief McCall, Congresswoman Captur, Congressman Ryan, and thank you all for your support. Okay. It's a real pleasure to be here in Cleveland to release to the public the first results of this feasibility study. This is the first step towards bringing this transformative technology transportation to Cleveland, Northeast Ohio, and to the Great Lakes region. The results of these studies are unprecedented. The study reveals and shows that Hyperloop is profitable and also brings massive economic benefit to the region. We are also very pleased for the support that we have had in this area. We have more than 80 companies and entities helping us, including all the members of our Great Lakes Hyperloop Consortium. We are here to build the Hyperloop in Ohio and by Ohio, okay? We really believe that there is a huge potential, a huge capabilities, huge tradition, huge industrial expertise in this area that we can use to build together, the Hyperloop. So there is also a reason we are here and we are not in other places in the world. And, it's the real close collaboration with NOACA under the leadership of Grace. Grace, thank you very much for your support. Thank you very much for everything that you have done for this project. And I would like personally congratulate NOACA for his recent MPO of the Year award and for your continued support to the project. I would also like to do in an internal basis, I would like to thank Andrea Amendola, that has been the person in our organization that has been working hard to put all these teams together. So it's clear that this is only a first step. We still have work to do, okay? But we at Hyperloop TT, we're very optimistic and we are very confident that we will be building the Hyperloop in the United States in this region. Thank you very much to everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and thank you for coming. Let me say from the outset that I have worked in the world of transportation for years and many exciting projects in that time frame. But what we've embarked upon with the feasibility study for the Great Lakes Hyperloop is truly transformational. Hyperloop technology is real and achievable, and we in Northeast Ohio have the chance to play a major role in making it a reality. And we are happy to be leading that effort. What the Hyperloop represents to Northeast Ohio is so much more than just speed and efficiency. It opens up our region to the rest of the Midwest, connecting us all in a network of technology and resources and people, which means jobs as well. I'm so very pleased that we've been able to form a working relationship with HTT, our feasibility study partner, and TEMS, our consultant, to reach the major results that will be discussed later at the press conference. I would be remiss if I did not spend some time thanking our funding partners, for without you, the study would not have been possible. I'd like to start with thanking the Ohio Department of Transportation, the Ohio Turnpike and Infrastructure Commission, the Richard King Mellon Foundation, and finally, the Foundation for their contributions to this effort. Let's give them a round of applause. I would also like to thank HTT for their true public-private partnership in funding and through the details of the study with us. Thanks to all of our elected officials and NOACA Board of Directors. I appreciate the comments about me, but it's not about me. NOACA only moves forward, and particularly relative to the Hyperloop feasibility study, because we have board members who think big and who move the agency forward. They are the true visionaries who had the foresight and the ambition to believe that this transformative system would benefit our region and that we should capitalize upon it. I want to give a special thanks to U.S. Rep. Marcy Kaptur for all of your important work to help our project and to recognize and advocate the need for the Hyperloop for the Great Lakes mega region. It all started with conversations with HTT, Marcy Kaptur, and myself. Thank you. From the start of this project, our sentiment was, why not Cleveland? Why not? Cleveland was the first to build a municipal airport in the country back in 1925, Cleveland Hopkins International Airport. I often say Amelia Earhart was at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. We have photo documentation of that. So Cleveland has always been pivotal in transportation technology. We also are the home of Garrett Morgan, who invented the traffic light. So we're not afraid of new technology, and we still want to be the front runner. So this mode of transportation, based on the current feasibility studies that hosted technical advisory committee meetings and stakeholder meetings throughout the project corridor, we thank you for your support and partnership. We're better when we work together, and our collective efforts for your support and partnership. We're better when we work together, and our collective efforts made this day possible. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Andres. Your leadership is appreciated, and your successes are marked with great pride for our region today and for our mega region tomorrow, for getting us this far to this very important milestone. I'd like to introduce our next three speakers this morning: U.S. Representative Kaptur, U.S. Representative Tim Ryan, and Myron Pakush, ODOT Turn Coordinator Administrator. Please.
Good morning. Thank you so very much, and to all the dignitaries who are here today, every one of you, thank you for staying curious and for inventing the future, for staying curious and for inventing the future. Abu Dhabi, where did you come from? Yeah, Abu Dhabi. Okay, all right. Abu Dhabi. All right. Most of us didn't have to travel that far. But you here who are in the winter season, which is something unknown in other parts of the world. I'm very honored to be here with my colleague, Congressman Tim Ryan, who is one of the most inventive members of Congress I have the privilege to serve with. I've been a camp, so that is the purpose of this morning for President of the United States. And think about this, Americans. was not allowed on the stage Columbus because he didn't have enough money. And so candidates got in from California and New York who are billionaires and got in. That's wrong. That's wrong for our country. That's not the reason that we're here to tell you what. When the money to provide additional studies and research assistance for this project comes up this week when we fly back now to Washington, D.C., Tim Ryan will cast his vote in favor of research for magnetic levitation and the advancement of systems like this one as part of the Federal Rail Administration budget. And I am honored to have him as a colleague. We work together all the way from Youngstown through Cleveland to Toledo, over on the west, paralleling the certified wind turbine that was ever invented was invented by a company here, Brush-Wellman, years ago. And they talk about it in Canada, but it's not talked about much here. So invention is at the heart of who we are as Ohio. And recently we just moved a new statue into the capital of the United States. And that statue for Ohio was actually Thomas Alva Edison holding a light bulb. As I look at this project, Grace, and all of the effort that it's taken to date, I am very excited. And I hope as just one lawmaker, Tim and I state, I am very excited. I hope just one lawmaker, Tim and I serve on the Defense Subcommittee together. We think about defensive research projects. Just next over at Lumber, we are building the vehicle where the Space Cat will go from Earth to eventually Mars. All right, think about that. And we have and I hope that you will come back to me. I hold a gavel for the moment on the Energy Committee, Energy and Water, and that we will think about the research that is necessary to advance the technology, and that we'll think research that is necessary to advance the technology, both to save energy. I think that, what is it, 0.35 per hour produced, a minute that produced in this technology, but that we will figure out how to use the assets that we have and push science. So this is the perfect place to now at the Great Science Center. Thank God Cleveland has it, and that is so well regarded. Val, thank you so very much for your chair role in pushing this forward. Honestly, I just think this is one of the most important projects, and all I'd like to ask the CEO is if we can find a way to channel it and take it to Canada or float it on Lake Erie and link us to Ontario, Canada. If you link the O of Ontario to the O of Ohio, we could become our own country. We are so powerful economically. So let's figure out a way to do it. Thank you all for being here. Congratulations. We're glad to be partners.
Thank you. It's not often as colleagues in Washington, D.C., we get to see each other all the time. It's not often we get to be with each other back home in the home state or the home districts. And that's Marcy Kaptur every single day in Washington, D.C. on behalf of this community. And I will tell you, there's no more articulate spokesperson in Washington, really at the highest levels, chair of the Energy Appropriations Subcommittee that funds the Department of Energy and articulates the future, like she just did, but tying it to the economic impact of working class communities that have been left behind for 30 or 40 years. And what's exciting about this project and having Marcy get $5 million to help provide the architecture for this, and I'm supporting what her initiative here because it's going to have an impact all over this region. And I'm here in some ways to represent the Cleveland to Youngstown to Pittsburgh part of the corridor, which I know is coming, right, Mr. De Leon? Yes, good answer. Because it's going to have the impact. And if you just take half a step, and I know Marcy has traveled a lot, I've traveled a lot, I've been to China and India, and I remember coming back after only being in Congress maybe 5 or 6 years. And you go to China and you see what they're doing there at such a high level with heavy, I don't want to say public-private partnerships, but heavy public partnerships with some private risk-taking. But what you see there is mammoth investments into magnetic lev trains. I rode on one that went 200 miles an hour. This was 10 years ago. And I came back to my district, which includes Akron and Youngstown. And I just thought to myself, boy, we're not Youngstown. You come from Youngstown, you're like, we got to beat Cleveland and or get Pittsburgh, or, in Cleveland and Pittsburgh and all that stuff. Not football, believe me. I don't want to talk. I do not want to talk Cleveland Browns football this morning. Yeah, it hurts. It hurts. But realizing that our mega region, it's the mega region that's competing against Beijing. It's competing against Mumbai. And if we're going to stay ahead, we're not ahead in the United States just because it's happenstance. We made critical decisions over the course of many decades that got us to the position. And we're going to maintain this position. We make decisions like what we're talking about here. And to me, tying the Chicago, obviously their assets, Toledo with their in solar technology and green energy, what's happening in Cleveland in biotech and healthcare. You go down to Youngstown, cutting-edge additive manufacturing and 3D printing, energy, tying it to polymers in Akron, going on to Pittsburgh and tapping into healthcare, their artificial air, their biotech, their engineering, their robotics, their artificial intelligence. This region on the map compete where these workers can get back and forth in 30 minutes is an astronomical advantage our economy here to blow this thing up. And that's what's exciting. Here we say one last thing. I read of this a few weeks back, and it was a take on the David versus Goliath story. And I was reading this book was that we all knew David was outmatched, outexperienced, and the phrase in the Bible is that David, before he went into the fight with Goliath, thought about how he killed a bear and a lion with the bears. And it was he remembered victories before he went into the big match. He remembered his victories. And so as we sit here today, any victory we've had, North Ohio, has been when we worked together. There's not one major project that's happened in this community or my community or anywhere around where we didn't work together. And so we need to remember that it'll be Mr. De Leon. It's going to be Democrats. It's going to be the Republican in the governor's office. It's going to be Dave Lowski in the Idaho Building and Construction. Local civic leaders, and Armin and the mayor and his team. Togetherness. That's how you get this stuff done. Remember our victories. And our victories came from, that's how you get this stuff done. Remember our victories. And our victories came from togetherness. To this project, we want to see it through because it will give our kids and our grandkids opportunities that other generations never had. Thank you so much. So much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. On behalf of Director Jack March, thank you for having me here today. The history of transportation in the United States is woven throughout the story of our state, from manufacturing to aviation, innovation, automotive, and automotive parts manufacturing. Ohioans have always been leaders in developing and supporting new, innovative ways to get around. March recently traveled the state telling our ODOT employees that we are on the precipice of a transportation paradigm shift unlike anything we've seen since innovation of the automobile. As a state responsible for building and maintaining our road and bridge network, Governor Mike and Lieutenant Governor John said have asked us to keep things on the pulse of these advancements, strategic investments where they make sense, like autonomous vehicles, vehicle-to-vehicle or infrastructure communication, and vehicle electrification. Hyperloop is another example of a fast evolving technology we are all watching closely that could revolutionize the way we move people and goods throughout the state and the country. We were happy to support this feasibility throughout the state and the country. We were happy to support feasibility. Look forward to doing the details today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Representatives Cap, Ryan, and Akish for your service and for your inspiration. We will now have remarks from Consortium Member Carl Committee.
Thank you very much. I'll just say a few words on behalf of the Aviation and Aerospace Technology Committee. Thank you very much. I'll just say a few words on behalf of the Aviation and Aerospace Technology Committee, which I'm a member of, and I'm chairman of the Aerospace Council. I'm going to give a couple of statistics, and I'm here to introduce Chuck Michael in it. But the closest technology that makes Hyperloop is the aerospace technology in the industry. The passive levitation has come out of the sector, and I represent basically the aerospace industry in Ohio, and we've been organizing ourselves for quite a while and bit of the Great Lakes Loop Consortium, as well as study I'm very excited about. I also represent a firm that a lot of spaceflight hardware, and as someone said, we've been in the aerospace and aviation sector here in Ohio for quite a while. There's a NASA center here, the headquarters of the Air Force is in Dayton, and it's also a home of Air Force Research. So if people have talked about the mega area, the Great Lakes region, if you looked at from an economic standpoint, it would be like in the top 5 economies of the world. And the one sector that's really leading and still ahead in this country, certainly from an in a perspective, is the aerospace sector. We have a huge amount of exports, and if you include Canada and Quebec as well, not just Ontario, it's second to none. We look to make this happen. Really, the local supply and supply chain, and we're all about making here, and we're excited and to map. So now introduce Mike or Chuck. Michael, sorry, we're all here. Chuck has led this study, and we're excited to hear the details. And I'm excited to get this thing going. So thank you very much.
Good morning, and thank you all for coming today. I have the privilege of describing just how phenomenal this technology is. So we're going to go through this very quickly, but so fasten your seatbelts because it's going to be quite a ride. The Hyperloop system, so fasten your seatbelt because it's going to be quite a ride. The Hyperloop system is housed inside of a reduced pressure, and there's a capsule inside that is a similar fuselage without engines or wings. The capsule is supported and levitated with a passive magnetic levitation system, and what that is a series in a specific. It takes no energy at all to levitate. Remember when you're kids and you're playing with the magnets? And that's exactly what we've done here. They're a little bit larger and a little bit more powerful, but they will levitate the machine with no energy input. Now you're inside a reduced pressure tube, and you're off the guideway that we call it, that it's so there's no aerodynamic because we have air. The net drag that you get from the magnet actually reduces the faster you go. So now we've designed a machine that the faster, the more efficient it becomes, which is a little counterintuitive, but I'll show you how that works. Everything closed so that we have any crossings. We don't have any traffic anywhere, and up took the opportunity to technology. There we go. You've heard of the partnership that we formed with NOACA, and this is the picture of the P3, as we call it. This is a very important part in how this project started. NOACA issued a request proposal for consultants. They did a consultant out of Frederick, Maryland, with a long history in transport economics, which was a big key for us, as well as the technical side and determination. From there, we initiated the feasibility study with a scope of work, and we started. We issued the P3 was started in February of 2018, and we began the study in July of 2018, and we finished last night. So there you go. The other key part here, and you've heard it described a number of times, and that's the local involvement. The Great Lakes Hyperloop Consortium includes over 80 that we've mentioned, but it couldn't have been without that. If you look at the number of entities here, it is incredible. On the top is the federal government, and the United States Department of Transportation organized a special council of all the administrations inside of the DOT, and they call it the NET Council. It stands for Non-Traditional and Emerging Transportation Technology, recognizing that a technology Hyperloop doesn't fit in any of the existing administrations. It's a little bit highway, it's a little bit railroad, it's a little bit aerospace, and so the US DOT organized that council. What that project is, when we go to DC and we sit down in a meeting, we have representatives from every conceivable unit inside of DOT that will have a role in this project. So now we don't have to go to 15 meetings, we can have a single meeting in DC, I'm sure committees. And these were very critical. One in Pittsburgh, one in Cleveland, and one in Chicago. Each of these areas have their own specific needs, and both from transportation and from how we site stations, and so that's a very important part. It brings all of those areas into the project, and this is all the DOTs, the Turnpike authorities, the MPOs, Metropolitan Planning Organizations, and others in each of these communities that were invaluable. The feasibility study itself had all of these pieces that we had to answer, and they're all complete. The pieces that we had to answer, and they're all complete. The route study between, very important. Independent capital cost estimate. This is something that we had a third party prepare the cost estimate for us. Operating cost, because it's never been done before, so that's a very challenging thing for us. Operating, because it's never been done before, so that's a very challenging thing. Operating cost, revenue projections and forecast, cost benefit analysis. Those of you in the business understand that there's this magical mathematical system the federal government uses, cost analysis. Supply side economics. This is where the jobs begin to show up, and the transportation oriented development (TOD), which is going to occur around the stations in all of the locations, and that has a real impact and positive benefits to the communities. This is the route that we're working with, beginning in Chicago through South Bend, Toledo, Cleveland Airport, Cleveland, Youngstown, Pittsburgh Airport, and downtown Pittsburgh. There's 3 routes there, airport and Pittsburgh. There's 3 routes there. This one is what we route. The fastest possible way to get to Chicago. It's a little on the way we go water. Don't go in the water, but we go underneath the lake bed. And that's around a 30-minute journey, although it gets expensive, and we stood out because we're very curious. The blue line is what we call the turnpike route or the toll road route, and that is existing highway rights-of-way all through the same thing and into Chicago, so you can see how important it is to have the DOTs involved at the front end of this to help us map out this pathway. When we get to western Pennsylvania, to help us map out this pathway. When we get to western Pennsylvania, things change a little bit because the topography there wasn't as in Ohio and Indiana, so we had to look at a number of different routes. We'll have some areas that are above elevated. We'll have some conditions that are underground, that we have developed some interesting ways of building around where it's cheaper to build and minimize the impacts than it's less expensive than an elevated system, especially in an urban environment. Here's an interesting thing. The transformative nature of this entire system, it enters as transport revenue like we've never seen in our lifetime. Anyone's room was when the others took off, and that was the last time there was really any introduction of a new mode of transportation. It's over 100 years ago. So this is a history-setting moment here, and we're extremely excited to be here. Now, in the inside in the passenger, so if you go from Cleveland to Chicago, this is a speed profile. This shows the acceleration where it goes up, and then you slow down and you speed up, and we do that when we come to corners and so forth, and we'll begin to optimize that. But this is a 330-mile journey from here to Chicago. You have an average speed of 439 miles per hour, and you have a top speed 700 safer than an aircraft. And they are very safe these days. So from Cleveland to Pittsburgh, now you have a 143-mile journey. You have an average speed, if you're really have 143 miles, you have an average speed, if you're really not to Pittsburgh, an average speed of 339 miles an hour and a speed of 525 to slow you down. This is an energy comparison. This also is a benchmark, if you will. This compares the efficiency, a benchmark, if you will. This compares the efficiency and the energy consumption of this mode of transportation. You see a high-speed rail very efficient, but it doesn't go that fast. The name of the rail is really not that in our world anyway. A car is much efficient, and the faster you go, that line beside it, the faster you go, the more energy you use. An aircraft is the more fuel you use. And when you come to Hyperloop, the faster you go, the more efficient it becomes. And that orange line along the top is the energy we generate ourselves to power the system, and we're energy net positive, and we're energy positive, and we're able to sustain the operations and the energy of the system without relying on existing supplies. Now here, this is emissions, and this is an easy answer for us. But if you look at a car and an aircraft and a rail, and they all have CO2 emissions, we don't have any. So now, if you're displacing existing forms of transport loop, so over the course of 25 years, we've reduced the emission of CO2 by 143 million tons, just by 143 million tons, just in this region alone. That's incredible. No one else could do that. As we get into functions, and this is one part for some of us anyway, there's ridership and there's revenue and so forth that we look at. And adaptations, you tend to add riders, which is reasonable. You also have this compounding effect, and there's a synergy as you add an additional community. Like when we added South Bend, Indiana, as an example, we had a big growth in ridership, not because people are going from Bend to Chicago back and forth like that, but mostly there's an access from South Bend into access into Cleveland, access from Pittsburgh back to South Bend if you want to do that. As you look at the synergies in where these stations are based in a strategic sense, you can design a system that is extremely effective financially. I'll show you how. There's a diversion of riders from automobile or plane rail or whatever they're doing now. There's a diversion. Also an induced ridership. These are people that may travel from Cleveland to Chicago on a ridership. These are people that may travel from Cleveland to Chicago on a daily basis that don't now, or who I don't commute. Now can do that. That's what you can do in Cleveland and go to a ball game in Chicago and probably save money, enough money from parking to buy the ticket to go back and forth. A lot of market influences here. Now, this is a fun one too. Pardon me if all this math stuff is fun, but this is what makes the system work. Part of this math stuff is fun, but makes the system work is understand economics of it. This is the cost of freight transport. So if you look at the left side, this is air cargo costs about $4.10 a ton mile. A ton mile. So not everything traveled by air cargo because it valued in order to justify that high cost. Our freight system focuses and targets the high value, sensitive freight and cargo that needs to get from point A to B as fast as possible. So if you look at our cost, 10, except for like in town because we don't do that too well at 700 miles an hour. But the value of shipping by Hyperloop is much more efficient and cost-effective by truck than it is by truck, and certainly much more than by air freight. We're competitive with water, which is like barges and ships and so forth. But if you have high-value, time-sensitive shipments, you usually don't ship them by boat. So that market's there, but probably won't be tapped that much. And rail, that's more of a commodity, bulk commodity type of a system where we're never going to haul coal or oil or grain or anything like that. But we will haul the time-sensitive, high-value, high-margin, time-sensitive, high-value, high-margin. And if the share's money, less than 3 cents. Doesn't matter what it is, there's going to be an improvement in the properties in the communities that you build it in. When you build a transportation system, there is a demand for development around the transit system. You look at any successful light rail system, high-speed rail system, you'll see a real growth in what we call transportation-oriented development. Growth in what we call transportation-oriented development. We've listed out here the value of increased development around various stations. Chicago, around various stations from Chicago to Oakland for $7 billion in development. That's what it means to the communities and to Ohio and the region up there is tremendous economic development. In terms of jobs, when you spend billions, you create lots of economic, 10,000s, hundreds of thousands of people. Investments over 25 years, 5 years, 1,000 jobs, just in the region. 47 billion spread out across the region, which is still significant. Property value spread across the region, which is still significant. Property value increase, again, this is the $74 billion number. The taxes, every time you increase the incomes and you increase the value of properties and you introduce new properties, you generate new taxes. So you have taxes, federal taxes at $9.4 billion, they're going to take their share. Property taxes $1.2 billion of over $12 billion in in taxes over the course of 25, not every year, but it's over the course of 25 years. It's still going to bite, but that's okay because you get some benefit. Now into why this is such a good deal. This is the infamous benefit question, but you pull all of the benefits and you add up all the costs and you relate those to each other, and you can come up with a ratio. If your cost exceeds your benefits, then you probably aren't going to build anything. No one's going to finance it for you. If your benefits exceed your cost, then you have a fairly good project, and then it becomes, how good of a project is it? From a federal perspective, you have to have your benefit ratio, which is the benefits to the cost of 1.0, which means they're equal. A really good project would have a benefit cost ratio of about 1.2, 1.3. A superstar project maybe 1.5, and here we come in at a very conservative level of 2.2. Tells the federal government this is a good investment. That tells the private this is a good investment. As you move from that into what we call an operating ratio, which is, okay, if it's good, how good is it? You relate your revenue to your total costs. If they're equal, you're not making any money at all. You're just trading dollars with somebody else. If you're up into the 1.5, then your revenues are 50% more than your costs. 5, then your revenue 50% more than your costs. In particular case, our operating ratio is 4 something. It's incredible. It doesn't matter if it's 4.1 or 4.2, depending on which way you look at it, but an operating ratio of 4 tells the financial community that it supports and validates benefit cost ratio. So all of this means that it's a financeable system that requires no subsidies, local, state, federal, at all, and that it can support its entire capital cost by itself. Think about that. Grace is here, and we thank her for everything she's done on this project. She understands the economics of this. She's a numbers person. She gets that. And as Grace says, it exceeds the federal standards. It exceeds really their expectations for a project like this. So we appreciate Dr. Alex Metcalf. You'll see him a little bit later. He's an economist. He's the consultant for NOACA, and he's going to talk a little bit about the economics of this. But he's been doing this for a very long time, and he's never in his entire career seen a project that performs like this. And the reason it performed like this is we're changing the norm. We're changing paradigm. This is not a railroad. This is not a bus. This is a system that we can levitate it and move it with no energy input on the levitation. We do use some electricity to shoot it down the track, but we get that from our own generation. We use electricity to shoot it down the track, but we get that from our own generation. So if you can build a self-sufficient system, it's extraordinarily fast with a low operating cost, they have something that is new and profitable and worthy of the next step. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. That was informative. I loved the math and very exciting results. So let's discuss those results in a little more detail. To dive into that and hear a little more on the Great Lakes Hyperloop feasibility study. We will hear from Dirk Album, Chairman and of HTT, Lucci NOACA, and Dr. Alexander Metcalf of Thames Consulting, part of our panel. Moderator is at Wheelock from NASA Glenn Research Center. Please join in welcoming our esteemed panel as they come to the stage.
It's great to be here. My name is Doug Wheelock, and on behalf of the NASA administrator and our administration and headquarters out here at the Glenn Research Center, welcome. As quickly as I could. And I grew up in upstate New York in a very small town on the west side of the Catskills, and just an ordinary kid from an ordinary place. And I watched people walk on the moon when I was a little boy, and I thought, like, those things seem so distant for me. That's not something that I can. Years later, I served as an astronaut. The old pioneers came back, and dinner that Friday night, I sat on the table with Neil Armstrong, and my knees were shaking, and they're shaking now actually, because I thought to myself, how did I end up here? You know, and I remembered how it came my time to ask him a question, and the only thing I can remember is growing up as a little kid and watching him walk on the moon. And I wanted to know how he felt, because I remember how I felt as an ordinary kid. And that night he said something that changed my life. And he said, you know, I asked him, I said, Mr. Armstrong, when you were standing on the moon, did you have a moment where you can actually, you know, deep breath and reflect on what a profound moment it was in human history? He said, I did. I thought about the engineers that built that rocket. He said, I thought about the engineers that rocket. I thought how does an ordinary kid from Ohio nervously, and I thought to myself, hey, wait a second, that's my story, you know. And the reality is, this is a story for all of us. We're all just ordinary kids from ordinary places. We're all just ordinary kids from ordinary places, and then we have some people that step out, dream, and their life intersects with the extraordinary. We change lives, and we get out of people's way when they have these innovative ideas, because we know the power of an innovative idea in any branch of technology or science will one day become revolutionary, maybe in a completely different area of science and technology. But we're in the business at NASA at nurturing and technology. But we're in the business at NASA at nurturing these innovative ideas. So it's a pleasure for me here. I'm so grateful to Ohio at Research Center. And like I'm from upstate New York. My wife is from Akron. I grew up in Doylestown, if you know where that is. And in fall, we were standing at Huntington Park up on the lake, and it was beautiful. And she looked at me. She goes, I hope you still like her in the winter. And I said, I'm from upstate New York. It's like, you guys don't have anything on us. But it's a real pleasure to hear our distinguished panel members, and I have some questions. I think we'll get right into the questions, and then afterward we'll open it up to Q&A as well. First question is for Grace. Grace, we've been told that the economic benefits of core are unprecedented. What does this really mean in practical terms for the folks that are living here?
So the results demonstrate that the Hyperloop can be funded privately. That is really the first time in ground transportation that that's the case. So you're looking at something in the form of transportation that will be available all and does not need a tax subsidy. And I think that really creates a different vision for us. Relative to the development, there isn't any funding that's required from any source other than the private sector.
Thank you, Grace. The next question is for Alex. Alex, the Hyperloop is expected to offer travel at high speeds. What will ticket cost for that kind of time savings?
In terms of the cost of tickets, essentially What we're looking at is very, very cost-effective fares. We expect to be in the range of about 2/3 Amtrak fares, which enter room, but on Amtrak knows are pretty competitive. We're there, and essentially what we expect is that we'll be offering the most cost-effective way of being able to travel in the corridor between the three cities.
Very good. Thank you, Alex. Question for Dirk. What will it be like to ride a Hyperloop in terms of comfort and safety?
So, at the end, Hyperloop is going to be very similar to what we already know. It's similar to an airplane, similar to a train. In fact, when we did this, we used acceleration rates that are very similar to what you know today in the train market. So you're able to get up, you're able to walk around. It's not the roller coaster rides that a lot of people are imagining. It needs to be something that appeals to a 60, 70-year-old as much as a year-old. So it needs to be a system that works for everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dirk. For Chuck, what's the significance of the Great Lakes Hyperloop Consortium?
Our consortium has over 80 members, and these are universities, they're city, counties, MPOs, DOTs, turnpike authorities. And as I said earlier, it gives us the ability to learn about each community from their own voices. These are things that we can't find out on our own in a short period of time. So we look to them to provide advice. We look to the universities and academic centers for local knowledge. As an example, the geology in Ohio. That's something that we can use locally. The aerospace industry is endless in terms of resources for us, and we have so much in common with them that this is a great place for us to continue to work, especially with aerospace.
Very good. Thank you, Chuck. Back to Alex. Alex, are you expecting Hyperloop to cost less to build than high-speed rail?
Yes, indeed, we are. The great advantage of Hyperloop is that effectively it uses a meter tunnel, and meter tunnel as compared to a straight meter tunnel that you would need for a high-speed rail. So whereas the typical prices for high-speed would run probably of something like $100 million a mile, we're probably going to be in the order of $50 million a mile.
Very good, and I think you answered Chuck's question. I had a question about cost per mile to build. And, Chuck, you could cover the differences between the water route, the direct route, and underground and above ground as well for us.
Sure. The options we have in terms of construction, there's several. Above ground and elevated, you can be underground, but that depends on the locations you're going through. So let's say we're in an urban area, downtown Cleveland. It would be very difficult for us to get to the center of the city in an elevated sense because we would have to go around buildings and so forth, and that's just very expensive. There's a lot of impacts in an urban setting for that. So we have an underground approach. So we approached in downtown through a deep tunnel. And that's what Dr. Metcalf tunnels are very cost effective. In that sense, it's going to be less expensive to build a tunnel than it is to try to weave an elevated system through a downtown urban area. If we're in the rural areas, we have an approach there because we respect the landowners and the rural setting, so that we're very careful that we don't adversely impact. So that it may be a shallow tunnel out if we're inside of a existing right-of-way for, say, the turnpike. We could use an elevation there, or we go in a shallow section to the ranges of costs would be probably a little bit less than 50 million a mile for the shaft tunnel, upwards to 60-some million a mile for the more complex, like Western Pennsylvania. So a big range there. So in the next phase of the work, we'll try to fine-tune how many miles of each of those that we have to do, but that's about it.
Awesome. Thank you, Chuck. Back over to Grace. Grace, could you elaborate a little bit on the right-of-way issue?
So one of the reasons we thought when we the concept of the Cleveland to Chicago and ultimately Cleveland and Pittsburgh is that it would be very active as a pilot for Hyperloop, because the right-of-way along that is already owned by government. So there's already a turnpike or toll road along the entire corridor, and that would suggest, as most planners would like to see, that any kind of land acquisition doesn't need to take place to be disturbing the environment. So really looking at using existing right-of-way.
Great, thank you. Chuck, you've given thought to using wind energy or hydro energy along this corridor, or do you mention there'll be solar? Or is there a capability to use cleaner systems as well for those areas?
We have a variety of renewable energy resources that we can use. If we're an elevated system, then we use the solar panels on top of the tubes. If we're underground, then we don't have any solar panels on top of the tubes. If we're underground, the solar panels there, or they wouldn't be very effective. So we can use another source like wind energy. We can use electric, a variety of renewable resources for energy sources are available to us.
Thank you, Chuck. Back to Alex. We talk a lot about passenger travel, but how will Hyperloop benefit freight along this corridor?
Freight is a very important commodity for Hyperloop. Basically, one of the big growth industries here at the moment is the less than truckload traffic and also the parcel markets. We also see the way in which we use UPS, FedEx, and Amazon to move parcels around for us and get our stuff, increasingly using that, and a really strong industry. As a result, there is a significant impact of that kind of freight on the interstates. The truck trains moving on the interstate are in fact for parcel traffic. That parcel traffic will grow probably in the order of 12-15% in the next 20 years. And what Hyperloop provides is the ability to move this. And what Hyperloop is the ability to move growth in parcel traffic, which really is driving the new jobs that we heard about in and high-tech industry. That Hyperloop provides the ability to move all that freight in the future. So whereas we have a capacity problems or beginning to have capacity problems with the movement of that freight on the interstate system, Hyperloop will offer the movement of that freight on the interstate system. Hyperloop will offer the ability to basically divert that onto Hyperloop and therefore give us the ability to accommodate the needs of the new economy as it's in the 20 years.
Thank you, Alex. And staying with you, Alex, the business model, is this a self-sustaining business case? In other words, really pay for itself?
This is there to remind, and the big take from study is that for the last 30 years we've been studying various forms of high-speed rail and various forms of transportation that we hope will provide better economics and better financing. The takeaway It is a sustaining investment. The IRR, the internal return on the project is 6%. And if the private sector want to, it could actually provide financing to actually build a system without any assistance from government. We think that a public partnership way to go. We think that, for example, the federal government probably would want to be involved in such a huge project as this. But if necessary, the private sector out from federal, state governments could in effect build and sustain the system over a 20-year period, which is the life of the project, with typical investment coming from like teaching funds, trade union funds, from the investment banks, the hedge funds, all would be interested in the kind of rate of return that we're basically generating project.
Thank you, Ed. Back over here to Grace. Grace, will the taxpayers need to subsidize the cost of this Hyperloop system?
You know, as I mentioned earlier, the idea would not have to do that. The private sector would be able to generate enough revenue through the development, operations, and maintenance of the system to be self-sufficient.
Thank you, Grace. Dirk, to you, finally. Sorry, I skipped over you a couple times there. The benefit, what's the benefit investor system?
Well, I see that it kind of was already said, right? So the biggest here is a system that is able to generate an income. And when we looked into this technology and the viability of this new technology 6 years ago, we saw that technology wasn't really the issue. The big problem to solve was that there's no rail line, no metro line in the whole world that's profitable. So the Hyperloop can be profitable, as we have shown and as we are releasing here today. And of course it allows for investors to invest into a stable company on the long term. So Alex mentioned pension funds, for example, are very interested in if you want to invest for a longer period of time and want to have a stable return of investment, it's the right investment for you. But I think the most important thing is also to think about what that really does to infrastructure and what it does to like the US, the opportunities that you have, because the reason why we don't have more in the world, more trains in the world, it's not about building. Everybody always talks about how much does it really cost to build them, but the real issue is to maintain them. And here in this case, it pays back the initial investment, so it doesn't really matter how much it's going to cost. It comes back and it pays for itself, and that's a big difference.
Awesome. Thank you, Dirk. Back over to Grace. With what Dirk had just mentioned about the return on investment, there are anticipated public funding of different in the future. Where do you see public funding apply to the system?
So the component of project that we have been interested as the private sector is in the public policy. So clearly we are interested in the routes, the alignment, the right-of-ways, the station locations, the fare structure. And to that point, I do want to mention Loop is profitable. It isn't profitable because it's profitable. It isn't profitable because it's only charging fares that are what site consider elite fares. This is expected to have fares accessible to all people, to provide additional opportunities for people to live and work in different places and to access those jobs. They would need to have a fare that is more like a commuter rail kind of fare that they could afford. So wanted to make sure I got that in there. And then I'm sorry, the question again. So wanted to make sure I got in there. And then I'm sorry, the question again.
Well, actually, leads me to the last question, which is for both you and you can
You
volley
were
these
saying,
back.
where does
but-
government provide additional?
Right.
So, so about that, we need to engage in additional study. As government, we want to make sure that the public policy ideals are maintained. So I see us, NOACA, as well as the other MPOs and the state, the Turnpike folks, being engaged throughout the study process. I see some engagement, the study process. I see some engagement in the early part of construction. In terms of funding, again, as Dirk said, the fund for the building operating is part of the analysis that would be paid for by the private sector and then as part of a normal business year. So really, we're looking being engaged as a public part of the public-private partnership to ensure that it's moving forward as a public asset.
Thank you, Grace. And last, for both Dirk, Grace, you can handle this. What happened now? What happens next? The system.
You want to say?
What I can say again, NOACA, along with our partners, local, have demonstrated that we are very interested in being this new form of technology. But this is a private sector driven initiative. And so we look towards continuing to partner, but taking lead from the private sector, they want to go with this in terms of next steps.
So we need to build it, right? Right? That's basically the next steps. Of course, there's a lot of smaller steps that come before that. The environmental impact study, for example, is one. Is as a company here now in the process of integrating the complete system in use, having done the testing, and hurdle to overcome is regulation, right? Peer framework. So being here and having the stakeholders together with us ensures that we are able to build this. And I believe that funding, especially now that the report is to bring a completely new mode of transportation to the U.S. And we're very happy to be here in Cleveland and have Cleveland being part of being the first ones to make this happen.
You know, we have been working at the federal level as well, and as both Representatives Capter and Ryan mentioned, there's opportunities at the federal level to partner them to advance the particularly relative to this corridor. So government, the local government, and state government partner to facilitate this.
Very good. Thank you for mentioning that. Having U.S. Representative Capter and Ryan here this morning is a wonderful connection and collaboration with the federal government, and as well as Dr. wonderful connection and collaboration with the federal government as Dr. for Government Office as well. We get a concerning question that we Great Lakes Center, which happens to double the center for NASA Center, those that were concerned. Props on the stage are not energized. Although Tesla and to be proud, for our panel members' peace of mind, they're not energized. So I think with that, we have a sigh of relief. Open it up for Q&A from the panel. So I think microphone. Raise your hand and the microphone will come to you. Thank you.
Hi, is this on? Hi, is this on?
Yes.
Steve Litt from the Plain Dealer. Greetings to our visitors and hi, Grace. What are the next NOACA and HTT will take into form a private to develop, build, operate Hyperloop.
So the next steps, as Dirk had mentioned, from a practical perspective, we are at an environmental impact and preliminary engineering along with additional economic analysis relative to the benefits associated with manufacturing the Hyperloop. To that end, we are looking for some funding jointly, and we have applied for the magnetic levitation that I believe
The amount of that grant?
it's $5 million of a total program, but some of that is public funding, some of it is private funding.
And the status of that application?
We just submitted the application in about 10 days, 2 weeks ago.
And which administration would that come from?
It would come from USDOT.
Any timetable, Mr. Alborn, in terms of any timetable, Mr. Terms, when you would like to see all this happen?
Liking to see it would be tomorrow, maybe today, but realistically there's a lot of bureaucracy, right? So it's kind of hard, but I think that events like these, and of course your support will help us to find other partners, to help us to gather more partners, and as you have seen, we have over 80 stakeholders here locally, and that really helps to move the project forward.
I also mentioned that there is funding that has passed through the House Appropriations Committee, as also mentioned earlier, facilitate and is developing overall national standards and policies, and though it has not completely passed yet through the Senate, we would be looking to work with the Net Council that
inside the study,
one of their pilots for that funding.
But I also believe that inside the study, the time, right?
Yes. So the study states essentially we are looking at and the preliminary engineering, and then after that, again, we're assuming that if everything preliminary engineering, and then after that, again, we're assuming that if everything moves forward very smoothly, the next year construction period, so that would take us to 2028 or 2029, I believe, to be assuming everything works as would be planned.
When are you starting to work on the EIS?
Well, we've not set a specific time for doing that. We're waiting for the results of the grant application, the competition.
Dan DeRose with Lighting. People are going to want some hard numbers on this. You talked about 50 to 60 million a mile route. You got 3 different routes there. Somewhere on paper, you guys have an estimate. If it's $50 million a mile, what's the total project cost? If it's $60 million a mile, somewhere you guys have an estimate. What is that?
In each of the zones that we've looked at, so many miles of tunnel, so many miles of aided, so many miles of the other. So we've already included in the estimate unit cost for each mile of each segment. The other thing that we've done is none of us have ever built this before, and we relied on the private sector to help us with the cost estimates, and we got all those estimates, and we added another 30% contingency just because we don't know. But I think that's a safe number because we're starting with a lot of confidence from the contract. They can build a tunnel, they can build pylon for this, but again, things change, and so the 30% I think is a waste. On top of the 30%, we put another 28% for additional costs like engineering, legal, administrative, things like that. So I think it's a fairly comprehensive budget, and we broke down as much as we can at level. The in process will help us define more closely the areas that are underground, the areas that are above ground, and then we can begin to get a little bit better cost estimate.
So you don't have a hard number. At the high end, it'll be X amount of millions or dollars. At the low end, it's going to be X amount.
On an average, it's around 55, I believe.
Total.
Yeah, I said, to be clear, the reason we are looking at ranges is because we still have open 3 different routes. This is a feasibility study, so we're not selecting which route we would take. And there's various options. And depending on the geographic terrain in particular, a mile would cost different in this location versus that location based on some of those aspects. A total cost of the project, I believe, Alex, you know that off the top of your head,
about
right?
$25 billion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Louis from Leading these guys. So I have a question regarding the design of the HTT pods. I know you guys mentioned you'll be using a magnetic figure commonly referred to back, right? My question is, would you be using linear or rotational motion to actually generate the lift? And if you're using rotational motion, do you guys have contingencies in place to deal with any of the issues that may come with it?
Yeah, so it's a passive magnetic levitation technology that was developed by Lawrence Livermore Labs, and brings a propulsion system. It's a linear motor. So yeah, I hope you know. But I'm happy to have you come and maybe to our LA office, and we give you a little bit more detail.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Nick from IdeaStream. I had a question about the in the back here, technical and the testing side of things here. In testing that you've done so far on the actual technology, how far has it traveled? How fast has it gone? And have you put a person on yet?
That you build or test technologies is have to do component tests, basically. So these technologies are all coming from existing modes of transportation, if you want so. So we were able to build pylons, we were able to create a vacuum inside tubes. Our partners have done these. We have done several tests. Now we're in the process of putting together the world's complete first full-scale system and do a whole integration of these tested components. That's something that you need to do in terms of the next step. So basically doing the whole integration of these tested components. And then after that, you're and there really you're able to get a little bit higher up to speed, right? You need to have a complete full-scale system over several kilometers to really get to the top speeds. That's, I guess, the answer you're looking for.
So have you actually sent one of these cars through it?
You're looking for.
So have you actually sent one of these cars through a tube yet?
So you can do the testing only on unless you're building it completely out, right? And if you have to build several kilometers, then I mean, you have to build it. So there's other ways on how the technology in a more safe way can test the fact that V extends the room. You can test this. You can test the proportions right now.
I'm sorry, just one other thing then. Do you have a timeline then for when you expect to build that fully integrated test so you can see how this works?
Yeah, so it's already built in Toulouse. We have our R&D center already built in Toulouse. We have our R&D center in Toulouse. And we're expecting to finalize the overall integration next year.
Carlos Grudzinski with Aviation. Important to do system demonstrations, and some of that is certainly tied to each project, and could you speak a little bit about, is that part of this project to have a demonstration in this corridor, and how is that important to the success of this project? if you can.
Normally, the way that we're approaching it in commercial lines that we're building, we're doing all the first segment, and on this first segment, all the regulatory work, certification of the system, and we're to the extent. That's how we're doing it right now in the Emirates, and we have another agreement in China. So it definitely at one point depends how the regulators want to approach that. Are willing to take over what we have done already on those systems, or if they want to do that again in the United States. We already are in the process working together with the DOT guidelines. We have works with the insurance company in the world, community. They are able to insure the technology, which is a very important part when you're moving over to commercialization of the system. We've been working with TÜV Süd on the safety guidelines. These now are exactly those documents that we have given to the Department of Transportation in Washington, as well as the European Council and many of the other countries that we're working with. So there's a lot of work that has been done specifically on safety and reliability of the technology in order to make sure that we're able to move forward. Because at the end, there will be a regulatory hurdle.
I think we have time for one last question.
Hi, Christina Blobbaum, Kent State University, Aeronautics and Engineering. So my question is actually very simple. You're talking about these other projects. Which one has the highest probability of being completed first?
So, as mentioned before, we're now in the process of the integrations. The project in the Emirates already has started. We have the design and engineering of the route. And this is the integration into Toulouse system base, taking the same concept, move it over and start construction in Abu Dhabi.
Okay, great. Thank you to our panel members. Let's give them a big hand. Thank you all. Thank you all, and I'll turn it over back over to Dr. Kristen Eldenberger.
Well, as you see, this is an exciting time for Northeast Ohio, for our communities, and for the broader Great Lakes region. Thank you again to all of our esteemed presenters. I know we have a number of esteemed elected officials here with us today in the audience that we've not been able to thank individually, but we greatly appreciate you being with us here today at Great Lakes Science Center. We're especially proud to have you at Great Lakes Science Center today. You may have noticed as you came in that the building's closed to the public today, but as always, as your workforce partner, we are open to the youth of our community. So you may have heard our 9th graders in MC Squared STEM next door in our hallway. You will also see, if you go across the hall during our reception, we have Euclid Park youth from 8th grade here in Cleveland Metro Schools on a blockchain workshop that they're here for. And upstairs we have youth from Andrew Rickoff School who are working on an IoT project for the day. So throughout the building, we are very, very happy to support innovative technology like blockchain, IoT, and this very exciting new future mode of transportation. This does conclude our press conference. HTT is asking media to please stay in the auditorium if you'd like to directly speak with our panelists. Guests are invited to a celebratory reception out in the promenade. And thank you again for joining us at Great Lakes Science Center.